Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're taking a look at a fan-made game book in the shape of Deathtrap Dungeon 3 by Ken Beuden, Daniel Flander, Jared Milne, Brett Schofield and Andrew Wright. This book was suggested by my patron Kim Jenson. Thank you so much for the recommendation, Kim. I'm really looking forward to it. Speaking of patrons, I have a new patron to thank this episode, a kind soul who has gone to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledged as little as a single English pound to support my nonsense. Sir Box, thank you very much. Your support helps keep this podcast on the air and ad-free. All patrons get access to a whole bunch of game books written by members of the Doom household, and as we speak I'm knee-deep in a new game book that I hope to get out before the end of the year. Deathtrap Dungeon is obviously one of the all-time classic fighting fantasy books, and its sequel, Trial of the Champions, was also really good. Baron Succumvit's notoriously deadly dungeon is a beacon for adventurers seeking to prove themselves and win fame and glory. It's got a genuinely awesome premise that provides a rationale for a dungeon that's trying to kill you at each and every step you take. It's a book that's often in consideration for the greatest fighting fantasy book of all time, and it seems quite natural that amateur gamebook designers would want to try and dabble in a sequel. I'm not immune to this myself. My gamebook Primetime Dungeons also riffs on the idea of fantasy adventures as a form of game show. It's an incredibly appealing idea, and it's one that's appeared elsewhere in popular culture in things like Battle Royale, The Hunger Games and The Running Man. I'm genuinely very excited to find out what lethal surprises the authors of Deathtrap Dungeon 3 have cooked up. If I've got any reservations, it's the sheer number of people listed as authors, which I think is probably a good thing as far as ideas go, but raises possible issues with the writing style. It's entirely possible it'll be fine so long as someone acted as a kind of copy editor trying to tie the various disparate elements together as seamlessly as possible. Now, there's not a great deal of information about the creation of Deathtrap Dungeon 3, which is a shame, but Ken Beuden, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, seems to have been an inspirational figure in the fighting fantasy community for many years and was instrumental in setting up the Titanica Fighting Fantasy Wiki, which has been an invaluable resource to me, especially with regards to playing some of the later and less tightly written entries in the Fighting Fantasy series. Let's take a look at the rules. We have skill, stamina and luck all present and correct, and the majority of the rules parallel early fighting fantasy precisely. The ever-changing rules for fighting more than one opponent are still the old school ones, which I prefer, the ones where you choose who to fight at the start of the round and then match your attack strength against everyone involved, but only deal damage if your attack strength is higher than the one you selected to fight. The rules also specify that you can test your stamina like testing your skill or luck, but the procedure makes use of 4 dice rather than 2. They also note that you can have difficult stat tests where you'll be asked to add a value to the result of the dice roll. All stuff that's appeared in Fighting Fantasy, but it's nice to see it laid out clearly in the rules section. Provisions work a little differently here. You have both food and water to worry about, and you start the adventure with 5 meals and 3 drinks of water. You can eat your provisions to regain 4 stamina as normal, but there's also occasions when you'll be told that you have to eat, and if you don't have a meal on hand, you'll lose 3 stamina points. Fortunately, you also have 10 health potions, which will restore 4 stamina points each, so there's no problem with saving your food for when you need it. On top of this, you get a potion of skill, stamina or luck, which will restore the relevant stat to its initial value, and in the case of the luck potion, you get to add 1 to your luck score on top of that. I have rolled up a character I've decided to call Maxwell Horse, because that sounds like a very heroic name. Maxwell Horse is an absolute beast with a skill of 12, a stamina of 23, and a luck of 11. That makes a pleasant change after a run of average to rubbish fighting fantasy characters. Maxwell Horse has a sword, chainmail armour, backpack, 5 provisions, 3 gulps of water, 10 healing potions, and a potion of luck. I think that's everything. Let's play Deathtrap Dungeon 3. Background. Another ale was shoved in front of you, the foaming head spilling down the side from the sharp impact. You nod your appreciation and raise it to the complete stranger grinning at you like a fool. Just tonight he thinks he's with someone special, his little moment of fame. But for the amount of ale he has already got you, you aren't going to hurt his feelings. And besides, he isn't the only one clustered around your table in the Swordmaster's arms. People are jostling just to look at you. All because of the violet sash you wear on your arm, the sash that is the mark of a contestant for Deathtrap Dungeon. For the last 4 days you have had people showering you with their affections. At first it was pleasant, then you wished for privacy. Now it's just downright annoying. But such is the price of notoriety, and the lure of this year's prize was too much to turn down. The Baron Succumvit, Lord of Fang, lost much face after last year when his evil brother's champion defeated the dungeon. Still, the brave man won his freedom from slavery and was granted the chance to fight his once captor. And following Carnus's death at the warrior's hands, the prize for defeating the new dungeon was a prize indeed, 10,000 gold pieces, and the title for Blood Island, Carnus's private stronghold. Serving guard on caravans for merchants has always bored you, and you ached for a challenge. This year, you are determined to enter the dungeon and win. You take a long pull from the tankard and stand to leave. People quickly scurry out of your way as you leave for your room. A clear head is needed for the next day and the challenges that lie ahead. You fall onto the bed and lie in a deep, dreamless sleep. So very straightforward setting of the scene in the early part. I do appreciate the brevity. It covers all the bases. It's reasonably evocative and tells us exactly what the stakes are, very much like it. There's only 3 paragraphs in this intro, which I think is, in many ways, about right. The next morning, the city guards escort you to the dungeon entrance overlooked by hundreds of onlookers. Your fellow contestants are already waiting. A huge Norseman with an axe, his red armour gleaming dully. A thin, robed man bearing the mark of the Yor wizards. A deadly man-orc assassin. A dwarf clad in fine chain. A huge man with full plate armour and a massive 2-handed sword, and of course, yourself. You are last to enter. Before you is the man in plate armour who turns to face you before he goes. You can feel his baleful stare through the visor of his helmet. Then he is gone, and it is your turn. Breathing deep from the fresh air outside, you take one last look at the baying crowds and enter the dungeon. So, I really like that there's a little hint in there of perhaps a little mystery that might be involved with this heavily armoured fellow whose face we cannot see. That I find really intriguing, and otherwise, yeah, just getting the job done, just setting the scene really quickly. You step through the doorway, the sunlight fading behind you to be replaced by the eerie light of the dungeon's glowing crystals. You shiver in the cold of a place that has never seen light, just darkness and death. Okay, small error there, given that there is light. There's the light of the dungeon's eerie glowing crystals, so the place has seen light. It is in fact lit. A little way down the passage you see a series of boxes built into the side of the passage. A few are open, others are closed, and one is hanging in pieces, splinters littering the passageway. But that does not occupy your thoughts. One of the boxes has your name on it. Do you investigate or continue down the passage? Of course we investigate. The box has an inscription on it. Answer correctly, and rewarded you shall be. Fail, and pain is your punishment. It never rains, but it pours. On top of the box are some carvings, but they are covered in a layer of dust. Do you brush it aside, blow it aside, or continue down the passage, warned away by the inscription? I imagine these are sort of buttons we can press, so I feel as though the answer to the riddle is like a jug, which doesn't rain but can pour. So I guess brushing it aside leads to potentially pressing the wrong button. So let's blow it aside. There are 5 carvings on the box. A snowflake, a sword, a jug, a crown, and a cloud. Do you want to press one or continue up the passage? Well, we've already worked out that the answer should be a jug, so let's press the button with the jug on it. As you press the jug, it lights up. The box springs open. You have answered correctly. A jug does not rain, but it can pour. Inside is a note and a bronze ring with a crude star etched on it. You slip the ring on your finger and read the note. Congratulations, adventurer! The puzzle of the box means we shall give aid only to those who deserve it. You have earned your prize. This ring may aid you in the future. Its magic is powerful, but it can be used only once, so careful how you use it. Do not try to take another's ring. They are tuned only for the rightful person. Good luck. You'll need it. Baron Succumvit. The ring indeed is magical. It can be used to paralyse an opponent. Simply treat the battle as if you had won. It cannot be used on any creature with a skill above 10. So I guess one of the adventurers decided that the way forward was, rather than trying to answer the riddle, just smashing the box open. And fair play to them. That is a lovely little detail. Leaving the boxes behind, you soon come to a junction. One goes northeast, the other northwest. Do you want to go left or right? I will go left, of course. Always left. The tunnel slopes a little and then widens into a large cavern. The light comes from a large crystal set in the roof, and plants grow up on the floor, obscuring the centre of the room. You fight your way through it and come upon a small clearing where an old man sits smoking a pipe. He cackles when he sees you approach. We are hitting the full-on fighting fantasy classics, early doors, straight left-right decision, followed by an old man. If he turns out to be insane, I will be delighted. Yeah, I'm just making a brew. Fancy a mug? Guardedly, you sit on a small chair he waves you to as he gets up to tend a small brazier with a pot of bubbling liquid. Well, he says, waving a battered tin cup your way. So, do we take the drink from the weird old man in the dungeon designed to do murders? Probably not, but I sort of feel as though I need to try and gauge how they're approaching the challenge. So I'm going to accept the drink. You take a sip of the hot liquid. Ye gods, it's foul. Do you make an excuse and politely leave, or do you try to chat to him? You can always try to impress him by drinking the home brew. It feels like a stupid idea, but it's a great option. So I'm going to try and drink his horrible beverage and see if that does me any favours. The liquid has flecks of old herb floating in it, and old smoking weed stains the rim of the tin mug. Suppressing your desire to put it down, you drain the cup. You feel your stomach heave as the thick liquid trickles down your throat. So I'm going to test the old stamina. So unless I roll 4 entire 6s, this will be fine. Yep, 16, well below my stamina of 23. Well, not everyone can stomach me old homebrew. It's right here, don't it? He says, thumping his chest. Reason I drink it is it's a mild antidote to bee stings. Won't hold up to a proper barrage like, but it helps. In fact, come over here. He beckons you over to one of the hives. He cackles again. Watch this. He purses his lips, and a thin warbling sound comes out. Instantly, the busy drones move aside and work furiously about the entrance. A larger bee crawls out and crawls its way up his index finger. What do you think of that, eh? Killer bee. Able to fly too, unlike most bees like her. You think it's magic? No. We've got a yes or no decision. I don't think it's magic. I think it's just weird science. Well, how do you think I do it? He says, stroking the bee. What will your answer be? We've got a choice. I just think you know a lot about bees. I think you use a magic item, I think it is magic actually, or I don't know. I'm going to go with, I just think you know a lot about bees. Yeah, that I do. I've got a knack, it's true, but anyone could do it. Here. He hands you a small reed. I used to use this, but now I can manage without it. Put it under your tongue and whistle with it. You do, and the small queen gently wheels off his finger and onto you. See, she's getting your scent. He whistles once more, but the queen refuses to move. It seems you're stuck with her. Mayhap she'll help you if she likes you that much. Take her. The swarm will get a new queen in a day or two. So we've got a queen bee. At the start of every combat, roll a die. If you roll a 6, the queen will fly to your aid and distract your enemy, enabling you to deduct 1 from their attack strength. Add 1 luck point. Well, my luck is already on 11. Anyways, it's been real good, haven't you? Drop by again sometime. You leave, fighting your way through the foliage until you reach the other side. So that bee could be quite handy. This is going suspiciously well. Quite a densely written encounter. Reminds me a little bit of my own work in that sense. Beyond the cavern is another passage. You follow it until this too branches. Will you carry on ahead or turn right? I feel as though exploring the branches is the way to go, so we will go right. The passage meets another coming from the north. You decide to continue north as that is the nearest direction you were travelling anyway. Okay, well, nothing very exciting there. You want a few bits that don't lead to anything particularly exciting. You continue along the tunnel, passing glowing crystals on both sides until you come to a door on your left. The door is made of oak and has a large brass handle in the middle. Will you attempt to open the door or continue along the tunnel? Well, I'm very much a yes and person when it comes to improv, so I'm going to attempt to open the door. You open the door and enter a short passageway lit on either side by smaller crystals. At the far end of the passage is a red curtain. You can hear a cackling coming from behind the curtain. Do you want to return through the door or pull back the curtain? Interesting decisions to make. I'm going to pull back the curtain. Obviously I'm going to pull back the curtain, but I feel a little bit disquieted by it. You pull back the curtain and enter a large room. At the far end of the room is a large painting which seems to depict a ceremony of some sort. On the right-hand wall is another painting with the image of a sword as its centrepiece, and on the left-hand wall is yet another painting which shows a battle scene. In the centre of the room, an old man is sitting on a stool in front of a canvas. Old man number 2. Is there anyone in this dungeon who isn't an old man? At your arrival, the old man cackles. Without looking up from his canvas, he speaks. I find it amazing that even here in the middle of a dungeon, I still cannot continue with my art in peace. Do you want to rush forward and attack the old man for his insolence? Attempt to enter into a conversation or make your apologies and leave? I'd love to know what these weird old men are being told by Baron Succumvit. Whether they are being told this is effectively like an acting gig, like working for the London Dungeon or one of those sort of living history places, or whether he just finds weirdos and says, do you fancy free room and board in my dungeon? Just carry on doing whatever it is you do anyway. Inquiring minds want to know. But of the options, I think we probably want to just have a little chat with him. As you approach the artist, you realise that he is not holding a brush at all. When you look at the canvas, you see that an image is forming seemingly of its own accord. The artist seems to comprehend your thoughts and begins to explain. My magic allows me to paint without the need for such crude things as brushes or paint. I do not even need to see my subjects. At this point he turns his head towards you and laughs again. You are amazed to see that his eyes are completely white. He is blind. As you look back at the canvas, you can see the image forming looks remarkably like you. Again, preempting any questions you may have, the artist speaks once more. Yes, this is a portrait of you, but please do not be alarmed. Although I use different magic in my paintings, this one is not harmful to you. The Baron has commissioned me to paint each contestant that enters my chamber. To have survived this far is an achievement he wishes to honour in his own private collection. Do you want to ask the artist his advice on defeating the dungeon, or do you wish to ask the artist about the paintings in the room? I'm curious about the paintings in the room. I feel like there's a clue there. Feels like we want to be a little bit oblique. I thought you would never ask. Yes, I'm very proud of these pieces. They are all from my own hand, metaphorically speaking. He laughs once again. No, I would explain what each one means, but as they do say, a picture tells 1,000 words. You can have a closer look if you wish. Will you take a closer look at the ceremony, the battle scene, the ornate sword, or make your farewells and leave? Well, I feel as though one of these things is not like the others. The ceremony and the battle scene are sort of group pictures. The ornate sword is on its own, so that's the one I am going to look at. The picture of the sword is life-sized and incredibly realistic. The blade of the sword is hidden within a sheath made of a beautiful dark ruby red material inlaid with gold inlay. The hilt of the sword is made from a dark metal, but embedded within it is a star formation. 5 jewels, a diamond, ruby, emerald, sapphire and garnet. Test your luck. I am lucky. I roll a 10. My luck is 11. Just about lucky. Luck now 10. Light appears to glint off the diamond. It must have been a trick of the light given the sword is a painting, but you are sure of what you saw. Do you want to reach out and touch the painting, compliment the artist on his work and leave, or go and look at one of the other paintings? I will touch the painting, I think. You reach to touch the painting, but your hand does not touch canvas. As you move your hand further in, you realise that this is an illusion of a painting, and in fact, the sword is real. You place your hand on the hilt, and as you go to take the sword, you hear a catch. Test your skill. I'm automatically successful. My skill is 12. Are you successful? Yes, I am. You pull your hand out just in time to avoid a dart. Having avoided this trap, you take the sword from its resting place. The artist laughs behind you and compliments you on your discovery. Well done, my friend. What you have in your hands is an elven chameleon blade, of which only a few now remain. The jewels on the hilt represent the 4 elements of fire, earth, air, water, and the 5th represents time. The sword is not my creation, of course. It was invested with high magic beyond my means, and was created in ancient times. I am merely its guardian. It will not add anything to your skill in battle. Its magic lies in the fact that it can detect how a creature can be harmed most effectively. Such a sword is indeed rare. This sword will increase the damage you do to a non-magical being to 3 stamina points. It will also enable you to fight certain magical creatures that would otherwise be impervious to attack from a normal blade. Add 1 luck point, luck now 11. So we can either go and now look at the other pictures, or we can compliment the artist on his work and leave. And I think what we want to do is compliment him on his work and leave. I think it's unlikely there's going to be anything better than the magic sword in this area, and I suspect the other 2 paintings could well be traps. Despite your compliment, the artist looks disappointed. As you turn to leave, he says, "It is a shame that my work could not have kept you longer. I find that closer inspection of my work tends to improve its quality. Your dwarven competitor could not have agreed more strongly." He laughs in such a way as to make your hairs stand up on end. You leave the room in a hurry and continue up the tunnel. Someone's been caught in one of the magic pictures. Not me, though. I'm too clever for that. I'm the cleverest adventurer that ever lived. The tunnel heads north, then turns sharply left. As you round the corner, you see a door in the right-hand side of the passage. There is nothing on the door. As you listen, you can hear the sounds of swords clashing and what must be a death cry coming from within. Do you want to open the door or continue on up the tunnel? We will drag that door straight open. The door opens easily, and you see several large ramshackle bunk beds scattered about the room, as well as all sorts of miscellaneous junk. Whoa, tempting. A table and 3 chairs covered in coins and playing cards along with several tankards completes the picture. The room has a horrible stench, and you nearly retch as you take in the scene in front of you. 2 large, warty-skinned trolls stand fighting a man in red lacquered armour in the middle of the room. 4 other trolls are already dead, their reeking blood pooling on the floor, and the other 2 appear to be joining their fellows in the realm of death. The man skewers one in the chest and beheads the other with his huge axe, and he turns and notices you without even noticing the trolls. That doesn't make any sense. Obviously he's noticed the trolls. He's just murdered 6 of them. I don't know quite what the authors were getting at there. Whatever it is, I think it probably needed another pass. That's it. I think probably what they mean is the man turns and notices you without even acknowledging the trolls. Yeah, that I think is probably what they mean. It is the large Northman who entered second in the Trial of Champions. He raises his axe at you. "What do you want?" he barks. Do you want to talk to the Northman or attack him as one of your rivals? I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's probably not the easiest chap to talk to. He's just murdered 6 trolls. On the other hand, I have a skill of 12, a magic sword and an irritating bee. I reckon I can take him. The Northman raises his axe and shouts a war cry to Farragus. The Northman has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 9. So for the first time at this adventure, I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Northman. I took no damage. Between successfully rolling the 6 to activate my irritating bee and my sword doing 3 damage to him, it was all over very quickly indeed. The drawer in the room contains nothing but mouldy shirts, scraps of armour and a broken shield. The ale in the tankard smells foul and you decide to ignore it. You frown in disappointment as you realise the coins on the table are merely iron. The trolls have 4 gold pieces between them, and the Northman, in addition to his axe, carries an unusual parchment scroll written in the southern tongue and a large coil of rope. You take them both as well as any money you may have handed over to him. You are about to leave when you consider the Northman's axe. If you want to wield it yourself, you must subtract 2 from your attack strength due to its weight and your inexperience with such a heavy weapon, but you may subtract 3 stamina points from your enemies every time you win an attack round. It is not magical in any way. So, we will leave the axe because I've already got a much better sword than that. Take the parchment and the rope, and we will take the 4 gold pieces as well. Do you want to examine the parchment scroll? I surely do. As you try reading the scroll, the runes on the parchment begin to glow. You pause in alarm, but no harm comes to you as the scroll glows and fires a flash of light into your face. You briefly close your eyes from the glare and open them seconds later, trying to blink the spots away. Inwardly, you feel refreshingly cooled. You are puzzled over this, but you deduce that the scroll you tried reading has some magic. You are now protected from non-magical fire for 7 days, and if you take fire damage from any sort of non-magical attack or trap, you may ignore the damage. Also, you may reach a certain point in your adventure that could mean instant death from fire. If you see a single asterisk in brackets, you may turn to a hidden paragraph. It will save your life because you are protected from the fire. Apparently, the Northman either did not understand or did not bother to fully examine the treasure he found. Add 1 luck point. Well, my luck is now maximum, so that doesn't have any effect. Smiling at your good fortune, you leave and continue up the tunnel, leaving the 7 dead bodies behind you. This is going so well. You continue along up the tunnel until it comes to a fork once more. The right-hand path has a crude sign hung upon a rusted gate with rough string. It says, "Lower Living Area." Do you take this path or take the left? I will take the path to the lower living area. I do appreciate the sign. It does make this left-right decision just so much more memorable. The gate falls off its rusted hinges and crashes to the ground as you push past it. The loud noise echoes throughout the dungeon. Wincing, you ready your weapon and advance down the stairs. At the bottom, you find yourself in what appears to be the living quarters of Succumvit's minions. Maze-like tunnels and holes connect with caves and rooms of varying size. They appear empty at the moment, but who knows what lurks in this labyrinthine area. Do you want to search through the living quarters, or would you prefer to leave this section alone? I guess if there's no one here, there's no harm in having a bit of a rummage about. You wander through the living area of hundreds of filthy creatures. Winding tunnels and cramped caves soon have you lost. Turns out to be a terrible plan. Roll 1 die. I roll a 2, so there are 3 different exits. I take the first. As you are crawling along a low tunnel, you see something move in the corner of your eye. Looking around, you see a small goblin-like creature grinning at you and holding a sharp pin. Suddenly, it jabs you in your leg. Unable to turn around, you scamper down the tunnel as quick as you can, the little gremlin poking at you all the way. As soon as the tunnel opens up, you spin around angrily, but find that the annoying creature has vanished. Rubbing your sore legs, you decide where to go. So, another random die roll. I roll a 3. There are, again, 3 possible exits, and I'm taking the middle one. You arrive at a large pool of water, which an underground stream flows into. Looking carefully, you spot several gold pieces lying at the bottom of the pool. You try to pick some up, but find them stuck firmly to the ground. Do you want to throw an object into the pool? Otherwise, you can roll a die to exit by a random passage. I don't think I want to chuck anything into the pool. It'll just get stuck to the bottom. And there's nothing I particularly fancy trying my chances on, to be honest. So we will just leave by a random passage. Roll a 1. Running very low on these. The roughly carved room you are in is completely empty except for a broken water pot and several bowls full of yellow mould. As you walk through the room, your foot accidentally taps one of the bowls, spilling the mould onto the ground. All of a sudden, the air is filled with spores, some of which you cannot help but breathe in. Your lungs burn as the spores begin to infect you. Lose 3 stamina points. First stamina loss of the adventure, to be fair. I wasn't expecting that from Deathtrap Dungeon 3. But my stamina is now 20. Hacking and coughing, you stumble out of the room. And we're still very much in the random exit portion of the adventure. A roll of 3. You arrive at an alcove in one side of the corridor you are walking along. It contains what seems to be a musical instrument made completely out of bones. Curious, you tap one of the bones, creating a hollow sound. Soon you are playing your own little melody on the skeletal xylophone until you realise what you should be doing. Somewhat embarrassed, you look around and then move on. I hope there's nothing necessary to beating the adventure in this maze of random passages, because that would be very mean. It's quite a fun way of doing a maze, to be honest. I think this definitely gives you the feeling of being lost without the stress of knowing that you're going to have to really exhaustively map the whole thing in order to find the way through. It being kind of random does make it a bit easier to mentally deal with for me. Anyway, middle entrance. Or exit. Middle exit. A narrow cave stretches high into air, looking like the bottom of some crevasse. You walk along looking for anything of interest but find nothing. Roll 1 die. Oh, come along. Another 3. You are in a squarish room filled with straw mattresses and various orcish belongings. All are useless to you, so you move on. And this isn't a random exit, there's only one exit from this one. Does that mean I've found my way out? A wizened old goblin greets you as you enter his room. He is hunched over and walks with a twisted wooden cane. A human to be seeing, I am, eh? Not thinking to see one of your kind, I would not. Using great restraint, you ask the goblin elder how to get out of the living quarters. Patience you must learn, or help you I will not. Gold presented will help you out, I think, eh? It's kind of like Yoda, but somehow even more punchable. Do you want to give the goblin a few gold pieces? Sure, why not? You hand the old goblin 3 gold pieces and deduct from your adventure sheet. I wonder whether they've not thought about what happens if you don't have 3 gold pieces, or if you'll always have 3 gold pieces by this point. Could be either. It's going to be interesting to go back and check. If you can chuck all of your gold into the pool and potentially lose it all, you could have no gold at all. But then I guess you would, playing honestly, just say, well, I can't do the option where there's gold. But if you had 2 gold pieces, there's no way out of this section unless you give him the 3 gold pieces. So anyway, something to check later, I guess. You hand the old goblin 3 gold pieces. Courage I sense in you, young warrior. The path east you must take, then to the north, south and north again, then free you shall be. You leave the elder behind, following his directions. Eventually you find yourself back at the gate leading out of the living quarters. Gain 1 luck point. You head upwards and along the corridor. Well, we've learned something. For future attempts, maybe don't try and go into the monster quarters. It's a big old maze and it's quite annoying, although still better than many of the mazes I've come across. And you will get out eventually, just by the law of averages. So yeah, kind of cool, kind of irritating. I guess irritating, but in quite a cool way. After a while, another path joins your own. Both continue north. I have to say, I was expecting this to be really brutal, and so far it hasn't been. And I think that's a good thing. I think you can do a really entertaining, enjoyable, horrible, brutal dungeon, as the original Deathtrap Dungeon demonstrated. But I think it's really hard not to create something that's ultimately very frustrating. And this feels like a good adventure that has that vibe of being Deathtrap Dungeon, but so far feels significantly easier. You come to a set of double doors, and opening them, you find a room full of statues carved out of pure platinum. Men, dwarves, elves, halflings, even the odd orc or goblin. All of them are life-size, and you shudder as you realise they all have horrified expressions on their faces. Most of them are screaming a scream of denial or appear to be begging for mercy. You look around uncertainly, wondering what to do. At that precise moment, the double doors slam behind you and a small, grinning hobbit appears out of nowhere. He snickers up at you in a nasty manner. His garish robe looks vastly oversized on him, but for his incredibly fat stomach. He looks wider than he is tall, his stomach grossly oversized, the size of a troll's head. He seems to be waiting for a response. Do you attack or talk to him? This horrible little fellow will doubtless have some form of magic that can turn me into platinum, so I don't think anything is going to be gained by just stabbing him. He seems altogether too smug to be easily stabbable, so we will talk to him. Who are you? You ask. A trial master, the hobbit answers with a chuckle. His eyes gleam weirdly, and he periodically giggles in a bizarre manner that you find deeply unsettling. A trial master that will test your mind and your sword skill. Fail either of the tests and you'll join the other statues here. Succeed, and I'll let you pass on to the next part of the Trial of the Champions. Do you attack the hobbit or agree to take his test? Well, it's a standard part of Deathtrap Dungeon, the Trial Masters, so we will agree to the test. I'm sure he'll turn me into platinum if I try and stab him. You reply that you are willing to take the test. Good choice, he says, bursting out in a series of hiccuping giggles. He snaps his fingers, and part of the wall at the far end of the room slides open. Gesturing for you to follow him, you do so. You arrive in a large square room with another door at the far end that looks exactly like the one you came through. A trap door sits ominously in the centre. The hobbit rubs a magic ring on his finger and suddenly vanishes in a flash of light. As you wonder where he went, you hear a call from above. Looking up, you see him standing on a catwalk above the room. Prepare yourself for the first part of the test, he laughs triumphantly. The trapdoor opens and you hear a hideous growling and roaring coming from below. Drawing your weapon, you see a massive creature that looks like a hairy ape coming from the trapdoor below. However, as it drags its arms out, you see that each of the 4 furry limbs ends in a massive scything claw. You steel yourself grimly as you realise you face a claw beast. The claw beast has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 12, and every 4th attack round you must test your luck. If you are lucky, you can continue the fight. If you are unlucky, your weapon gets entangled in the beast's thick hair, and you must fight it unarmed, subtracting 2 from your attack strength. The claws of the monster will do 3 stamina points each time they strike you. I'm not entirely clear whether that means that the claws always do 3 stamina, or they only do 3 stamina if you fail the luck test. I think the reading is that you only take additional damage if you fail that luck test. So that, I think, is the most sensible reading. Okay, I'm going to fight the claw beast. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the claw beast. It reduced me to 16 stamina, and I was forced to test my luck once, which I passed, but my luck is now 10. I'm going to drink one of my health potions, return my stamina to 20. The hobbit laughs out loud for several minutes at your victory and tells you to enter the door opposite. You do so and find yourself in a bizarre room with a table and chair in the centre of it, and what looks like a theatre at the far end. On the chair sits a haunch of cooked wild boar meat and some ale. You hear the hobbit's voice telling you to sit, eat and enjoy the play. You try opening the door opposite you, but it suddenly swings shut and you can do nothing else. Will you eat the food or merely sit down? I'm going to eat the food. It'd be rubbish if this was poisoned. The food is excellent and you feel much better after your fight with the claw beast. At 4 stamina points, so my stamina now return to its maximum of 23. Making me watch puppet theatre is probably Baron Succumvit's cruelest ordeal so far. Several puppets dance out on the stage and you sit furrowing your brow in puzzlement. All of them are dressed like jesters and they enact a bizarre slapstick fight. You suspect the puppets are magically animated since you see no magic or puppeteers. That doesn't make any sense. There's a few sentences in this that do not make a single lick of sense. I would say overall it is perfectly well written. Not like brilliantly written or anything, but really solidly written. But every so often there's a sentence where I find myself wondering how on earth did that sneak through any kind of beta reading process. And that's one of them. I imagine that the sentence should have gone, you suspect the puppets are magically animated since you see no strings or puppeteers. As soon as the fight is over, all the puppets fall dead one by one. Soon a large stuffed toy that you think looks much like Lord Succumvit descends from the rafters of the stage and speaks. I had invited 4 guests to my dinner party one night. When we were gathering for a cup of wine after dinner, one of my guests fell down dead. My resident priests determined that he had been poisoned, which was quite shocking since none of the rest of us suffered any ill effects. No magic was detected on him. How could the murderer have poisoned my guest? The obvious answer is that the cup itself was poisoned. So everyone's drinking the same wine, but the one cup has had poison smeared around the rim. And indeed, that's one of the answers you can give if you think the cup was poisoned or if you think he was magically poisoned. Those are the options. You're unlikely to think that he was magically poisoned given that no magic was detected on him. So we'll go with the cup being poisoned. Correct! The Succumvit puppet congratulates you. Now that we determined how the deed was done, we need to determine who did it. The first of my guests said that he had been in the library for most of the night before dinner. The second guest said the same thing and they both backed each other's story up. The third guest said that he had been reviewing his accounting ledgers in my study and could not have poisoned him either. Who is the one who poisoned the cup? I don't think it's any of them. I think it's Baron Succumvit, is my guess. He's the one who owns the cup, after all. So we can actually say none of them. We can say first guest, second guest, or third guest, and we can say none of them. I'm going to go none of them. The puppet laughs. Correct! I, of course, was not the real murderer either. Not sure. I think he was probably the murderer. There was mention made of a priest as well. He could technically have been the murderer, but I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say that Succumbit was the murderer. Wrong, you answer. The puppet begins to protest, but emboldened by your chain of reasoning, you continue. How could you have known the cup was poisoned if you weren't the one who poisoned it in the first place? The puppet chuckles. Very good. Thank you for participating in my little game. The exit is through there. I do hope you enjoyed the show. As the puppet speaks, a portion of the far wall slides open, and you see more of the lighting crystals that mark the regular tunnels of Deathtrap Dungeon. The puppet salutes you and wishes you luck on your quest. Add 1 luck point, returning my luck to 11. And on that note, I think we will call a pause to the recording there. I think you've got a proper flavour of Deathtrap Dungeon 3. It's easier than I was expecting so far. There's always time for it to suddenly become horrible. And it's entirely possible that there's a scavenger hunt of items that are needed to finally beat the game book. But on spec, yeah, it feels oddly welcoming. It's just lovely to be spending time in this sort of environment again. I've said before I do really enjoy a stupid dungeon, but I struggle with suspending my disbelief some of the time, and this has always been a great MacGuffin with which I've been able to suspend my disbelief. So, I'm going to go away and play more of Deathtrap Dungeon 3 on my own time. I'll be back for you with some closing remarks in just a few moments. Tatty bye. I have finished Deathtrap Dungeon 3. It's pretty great, but before I dive into the details, I need to let you know that, as is traditional, I died shortly after turning the recording off. In this instance, I got through the next encounter, but died by opening an instant death door in the very next area. If I'm honest, it felt like it was put there to hit the arbitrary 400 section count. I literally opened a door and got magically burned to death by a monster who had the temerity to shout boo first, which is very much adding insult to injury. Overall, though, I had a really good time with Deathtrap Dungeon 3. It does more or less everything you want from a Deathtrap Dungeon threequel. It's a little rough around the edges, something you'd expect from a fan-made project with this many authors, but I'd say that if you pass this through an editor to tighten some stuff up, fix a few mistakes and sort out some clunky language, you'd have something that could easily have been published as part of the Fighting Fantasy series. If this had come out with full art and with the multiple authors hidden behind a pseudonym, I'd have totally bought it as a Fighting Fantasy book and considered it a fairly strong entry in the canon to boot. Structurally, it's quite nicely put together. Essentially, you have a series of left-right decisions that lead to a choice of small but richly designed areas. After each area, the paths converge again before you get your next left-right decision. While this kind of design can make a book feel fairly linear, it's a good one for a dungeon where the absence of landmarks can make it hard to mentally grasp the overall layout. Here, that's very straightforward, and it makes exploring feel very welcoming. If I was being hyper picky, I think perhaps a few places where you get to choose from 3 areas, and maybe the odd shortcut that takes you somewhere unexpected, would have made the structure feel a little more surprising, but it also probably lands better if you haven't surgically dissected a whole bunch of gamebooks in the way I have. I'm a big fan of structures that allow a player to visualise the whole book, so long as there's more to it than a simple corridor with encounters strung all along it like beads. This is at the lower end of complexity in terms of mapping, but given everything else that's going on, that feels like a smart choice. I said during my playthrough that it felt surprisingly easy. Having finished it, I'd say the difficulty is a little bit deceptive. It feels strangely welcoming, but there's really only one true path. Actually, it's more like there's 1.5 true paths, given that there is a little bit of wiggle room. And that's fine for this kind of book, honestly. A dungeon openly designed to kill you sets your expectations appropriately for needing to jump through a fair few hoops. And there's not that many absolutely required hoops here. I think there's 4 things you need to win. There's also a good selection of other things that will make your life significantly easier. Unsurprisingly, being immune to fire is very handy, but there's also a variety of things that will assist you in the fine art of hitting people with sharp things until they have to lie down. That's useful because there's a few toughish fights in this book, especially towards the end. Having a bunch of fun little murder toys will go a long way towards easing your progress. There are two big roadblocks to progress, which are the second and third trial masters. The first is pretty easy to get past. The second only requires a single item, but the third requires 3 specific bits of information to bypass. Plus, there's another item that is extremely useful once you get through it. 2 of the bits of info are scattered through the dungeon in fairly standard ways, but one is a little bit odd. One of the questions is the number of chameleonites in the dungeon, and the obvious answer turns out to be wrong. I got to the right answer by a bit of lateral thinking, but it didn't feel entirely satisfying. The only way to be absolutely certain of the right answer is to get an item from the living quarters, and you may remember that the living quarters are completely random, so it's very much down to the luck of the dice whether you get the item or not. If that's the intended strategy, then that's absolutely brutal, and that is going to kill the vast majority of runs at this book. I think there's some hints that'll let you get to the right answer if you pay attention, and I assume that's deliberate, albeit a little obtuse. The problem is, of course, there could always be more chameleonites in the dungeon, so even if you make use of the hints, you end up feeling a bit like you're cheating. This is one part of the book where neither strategy is especially appealing, and I think it could have used some work to make it feel less awkward. Fortunately, the other 2 bits of information are much fairer, albeit quite well squirreled away. If you want to make people do the living quarters section, and I don't think that's a bad thing, the obvious thing to do would be to just simply place the necessary item at the start of that section before you start doing random rolls. Overall, aside from the chameleonite debacle, which sounds like a mid-1970s Doctor Who serial, I think the difficulty is pitched really well. I do like that there's plenty of stuff that will help with things that are off the main path. There's a mad wizard you can restore to sanity if you take one path, and it's nice that attention has been paid to all the different paths, so the wrong ones don't immediately vibe as wrong. I'd say the quality of the encounters is generally pretty good as well. There's a lot of variety and a mixture of different traps and challenges. You can run into gnomish chefs, various dungeon factotums, and of course, a selection of other contestants. It doesn't lean particularly hard on combat, although there's enough fights to keep combat constantly relevant. There's some fun traps, and I'm even going to forgive it for having 2 different mazes. One thing I notice is that a few of the traps kind of announce themselves, which is really interesting. Several times you're more or less told there's going to be a trap, and it's up to you if you want to proceed or not. There's a whole separate discussion here about how traps shape behaviour in role-playing games that's outside the scope of this podcast, but the short version is that traps by their nature make players risk-averse, and that can be a huge problem, particularly in a tabletop game, as the GM has to wait while the players methodically tap every square inch of the dungeon corridor with a 10-foot pole in case it's rigged to explode. Obviously, that's not something you need to worry about in a game book, but if you have too many unfair and surprising traps, it can start making the player very resentful about needing to explore, and that's not something you want. I think giving a little advance warning of some traps is a good way to soften the blow. Also, in general, traps should not be instantly fatal, and you should dole out plenty of nice things to the player alongside the various traps and snares, and Deathtrap Dungeon 3 is solid on both counts. There are some instant deaths here, but the majority will at least give you a chance to survive, and most will just deplete your resources in some way, rather than biting your head clean off. A good trap should be kind of awesome and unexpected, and if it's not, it should tell you something about the world. I don't know about you, but I'm generally done with pit traps. I could go the rest of my adventuring life without falling into another pit full of sharpened stakes. But there's a great example here of how to put a twist on a classic to make it more interesting. You come across a fellow contestant hanging from the edge of a pit trap which he has triggered, and you can think, sucks to be that guy, and carry on, and you'll wind up falling to your death in a second pit trap because it turns out the entire room is a maze of pit traps. Only the hanging contestant has the map showing the safe path. The only reason he fell into a pit trap was that he was holding the map upside down when he entered the chamber, which is a great detail. And overall, that is a lovely way to refresh the most boring trap in all of gaming. Of course, there's a selection of magical traps which I always enjoy. It says a lot that a room with paintings in immediately makes me think I'm going to end up getting sucked into one of them if I look at the wrong one, but that's testament to how well some of these traps are set up. If there's a big pile of treasure in a dungeon, your immediate thought is always going to be whether it's rigged to explode or if it's going to turn into a mimic. We can't escape the tropes of fantasy gaming, it seems, but we can try to present them in novel ways, and Deathtrap Dungeon 3 is great at doing just that. I think it showcases some of the best elements of having multiple designers. It just seems like everyone got to bring their very best ideas to the table. One area where I think a little more imagination could have been shown is the cast of human characters. There's so many middle-aged and elderly men living in this dungeon that you'd be forgiven for thinking that you'd wandered into a council meeting in a rural area. It's a common failing for some reason in fantasy literature that people demonstrate the most amazing flights of fancy in designing their world and then populate it exclusively with an incredibly narrow selection of humanity. I laugh whenever an old man turns up, especially if he's insane, but honestly, there's a whole bunch of other people out there as well. Maybe try and include some people who aren't middle-aged / elderly men. That shouldn't be too much to ask. With gnomes and an elderly goblin also on display, there's a weirdly Daily Express vibe, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. I mentioned mazes earlier, and I'm gently furious that there's 2 mazes here, and I actually enjoyed both of them. Partly because it means I can't really claim to hate mazes anymore, and partly because I think they show 2 approaches that more game books might have taken profitably. There's the essentially random approach of the monster living quarters, which is fun to me because there's literally no point in mapping beyond perhaps tracking a few key encounters that have useful stuff in them. It's got all the fun of being lost without any of the stress that comes from being lost, whilst also having very poor spatial reasoning skills. I also quite like these kinds of mazes because they tend to be quite fun on subsequent playthroughs, since they offer automatic variations, potentially in a portion of the book you may well already have optimised. Just don't put anything vital in the random maze, please don't do that. That's really irritating. The other mazes I like are puzzle mazes, where there's actually an easy way through if you can spot the right clue. This is the second maze in Deathtrap Dungeon 3, and I think the right path is gloriously obvious. This is definitely a situation where being obvious is better than being obtuse. It might be easy, but you still get the tension of finding out whether you've got the right answer or not, and this one does something quite fun halfway through that gave me a little pause for thought. Honestly, anything that doesn't make me get the graph paper out is going to get 2 thumbs up from me every time. Your mileage may vary. I know there are maze perverts out there who will doubtless be disappointed not to be asked to follow 20 different identical corridors round in circles. Me, I like it when there's something else going on, and I'm delighted that this is the case in both mazes featured in this book. The last thing to look at is the way they've iterated on the mechanics. There's some good stuff here, but also some odd stuff. I quite like separating out the food from the healing. We've seen in recent episodes concerning the sorcery series how bizarre things can get when food is both a source of health and a necessary resource. In those books, the thing to do is to eat only a single meal a day, which feels very odd for an adventurer who ought to be getting through plenty of calories to keep them sharp. Here you have healing potions to regain health and food to stave off starvation, which makes sense, except that I can't find a single example of needing to eat a meal because you're hungry. I mean, realistically, you're probably only in the dungeon for a couple of hours, maybe half a day, so it makes sense you wouldn't get that hungry. But why include the mechanic and then not make use of it at all? It's possible I missed a bit where you have to eat a meal, but I assume it was supposed to be more of a thing in an early draft and then it just never got developed any further. There's also a few bits of rules text that aren't as clear as they might be. Rules text is hard and joyless, and go and look at a recent Magic the Gathering card if you don't believe me. I get that it's not fun, and I don't begrudge the occasional lapse, like the fact that it's not clear whether the irritating bee can irritate multiple enemies or only one, and how you determine, if it's only one, which of the multiple enemies it's going to actually irritate. I think forgetting how items or spells interact with whatever rules there are for multiple enemies in a gamebook is probably the number one thing people forget when writing rules text. There's an argument for saying that if you're putting in a lot of items that mess with the combat rules, you might as well drop any fights with multiple people in. Just amalgamate them into a single monster and call it like the Angry Mob or the Horde of Badgers or whatever. That said, there's a couple of really nice riffs on combat here. I like that the Claw Beast forces you to test your luck every 4th round or suffer a penalty. The penalty isn't that bad, but I do like the idea of a fight that can drain luck as well as stamina. That's very cool. The book is generous, possibly to a fault, with additional luck points, which limits the impact, but better to give out too many luck points than too few. There's also a fantastic fight with a Beastman where you get to roll for what kind of bonus it'll get each round, and they're all really characterful, really impactful, and frequently very dangerous. That's a much better fight than the final showdown, honestly, which is a disappointingly straight beatdown with only a few simple additional rules around damage reduction. I mean, it's fine, but the Beastman fight is the secret final boss. I like that the book gives you plenty of opportunity to fight the other contestants as well. I do always appreciate that. I like being able to fight or find out what happened to everyone who went into the dungeon. That is very much as it should be. Overall, this is a cracking book, arguably better than many books in the actual Fighting Fantasy series. It's a little rough around the edges. It could definitely have benefited from a beta reader or two, and there's a few stock images that reappear perhaps too often, like old men and libraries, but I had an absolute blast with its best moments, and overall standard was super high. It's a whisker away from true greatness, which is no small accomplishment. It's one I'd urge you to check out. It can be found online. Yeah, support amateur creators. They're awesome. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Next episode is going to be a big one in the sense that I'll be finishing off the Sorcery series with the mammoth Crown of Kings. Will it be a suitably epic capstone to the journey? I certainly hope so. Don't forget that you can listen to my other podcast, Popular Antiquarian, where I'm currently watching so many bad films it's breaking my brain. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do so by emailing hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky @hjdoom. If you're enjoying this podcast, why not leave a nice review or a rating on your podcast app of choice? It does make a big difference. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.